And we were live. Cool. Well, thank you, all three of you, for being on. I know we've been chatting for a bit, and I've already really enjoyed it and getting to know you guys more. So I guess to quickly kick it off, I'm just going to do quick introductions of all our panelists tonight. And I'll start off with you, Joseph. So Joseph Say is a co-founder of Pantsuit Republic, Texas, and has been active in the fight for social justice and equity in Texas. He was also a candidate for the school board at Pearland ISD, and he focuses his efforts in the greater Houston, Rosario County area. And for more information on Joseph, you could go to josephsay.com.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for being on. And then our next panelist is Diana Martinez Alexander. She's currently an educator in a large urban school district in Houston, serving special education students, linguistically diverse populations, and lower socioeconomic communities. For over 20 years, Ms. Alexander has held several roles within the school setting, and she is passionate about advocating for children and family needs. As the daughter of immigrants, she's an activist committed to uplifting the voices of and serving and protecting the needs of underserved students and undocumented community members. In the time since the 2016 election, Ms. Alexander has devoted her time working in the community to fight on behalf of undocumented and mixed status families, building coalitions with other grassroots organizations, supporting local and state progressive candidates, and fighting for equity in the educational system. Ms. Alexander served on the leadership team for the Houston chapter of Pantsuit Republic, and also co-founded the Houston Rebel Alliance to focus on immigration, activism, and policy reform. Diana Martinez Alexander ran a people-centered campaign for Harris County Commissioner's Court and was a frontrunner in the March primary and lost narrowly in the July runoff. And like I said before, thank you for running and thank you for being on, Diana.
Thanks for having me.
Cool. And then our last but not least, we have the Honorable Susanna Woody. Susanna is a wife, working mother of three, and native Central Texan. She balances a successful career in project management, which she's been doing for 15 years, with family time and community service. She is a DVISD school board trustee for the past 8 years and president of the Del Valle Community Coalition. Del Valle Community Coalition nonprofit is a charitable organization that seeks to improve the quality of life in Del Valle through advocacy and civic engagement. As president of the Del Valle Community Coalition, her goal is to help close the disparity gaps in Travis County, which as a Travis County resident, there unfortunately are. So thank you for being on, Susanna.
Thank you for having me.
Cool. So before we kick it off, I know we, as a community, as a state, as a country, lost a very influential pioneer in the transgender community, Monica Roberts. She was a pioneering transgender activist and journalist from Houston, and she unfortunately passed away yesterday at the age of 58. I know Joseph and Diana both had the opportunity to work with her, and I wanted you guys to have the opportunity to say a few words. So Joseph, we could start off with you.
Okay. So Monica was an activist, an advocate, a friend. I'll be honest. I wish I had more time to have gotten to know Monica, but every interaction I've ever had with her, whether it was through activism or through just hanging out on a personal basis, was amazing. She was warm and loving and caring and gave so much to the community. And her passing is truly a loss to all of us. My heart goes out to her friends and her family, and to the community for losing such an icon. And I do want to make a quick statement. Just I ask for everybody to respect the space needed by her family and friends right now while they deal with their grieving process. And it's just a tragic loss.
Thank you, Joseph. Diana.
Basically, Joseph summed it up very well. I really enjoyed and felt the light from Monica whenever I was around her. And I am so grateful that I could count her as a friend. We got to talking a lot about, the race that I was running, my campaign, and she was an early supporter, and she gave me her endorsement. But beyond that, I just feel very lucky to have known her, to have shared space with her, to learn from her. And I want to, again, second what Joseph is saying, because there's a lot of pain and grief. And the Black trans community has been hard hit again and again. And so allowing that space and being thoughtful in how we, approach grief to make sure that we don't overstep their needs. And so I'm just really grateful again to have gotten to know her and to have gotten to laugh with her. There's nothing like it. So she is a light.
Cool. Thank you, Diana. I know we kind of mentioned this in the beginning to kick it off, everyone's great bios and all the work they've been doing. And I guess we could start off with Susanna, yourself. You mentioned in your bio this disparity in Travis County, and it's well documented and about Del Valle and the lack of resources in that community. So what made you get involved, and what more can be done or should be done?
Oh, wow, yeah, that's a lot. Sorry, I'm still trying to make sure you'll have me all in tears over here. Yeah, it's a lot going on in Travis County. I got involved about 11 years ago, through PTAs in my son's school, because right off the bat, when you move to the area, there's a disparity even within the educational system. And so from that moment, being involved with PTA, creating a community PTA with other local community parents, because we weren't allowed to have PTAs in the school. So Del Valle ISD did not allow PTAs in the school. Huge red flag whenever we moved out here. But then from there, it went from one school to a district and now an entire county that we're trying to advocate for. And my biggest thing is I grew up as a child of the working poor. So I know what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck and not be able to drive to a health clinic, not be able to go to a grocery store. And 20 years later, within the same area, nothing has changed. And so part of the reason why I ran in 2018 was because we need some change out here. We need representation that's going to go out and go above and really advocate for the community so we don't continue to have those disparities.
And just a quick follow up, and thank you for running when you did in 2018. Why do those whether it be folks that represent us in Commissioner's Court, why do they not care about that community, right? I mean, I live in that precinct, yeah. And it's night and day of what I experience of where I live and what I read about and what I've seen in Del Valle.
Yeah, a lot of it is really out of sight, out of mind. Like, a lot of people don't know that Del Valle ISD is half rural, half urban. So half of our students live within the city of Austin, and they still encounter those disparities and the lack of services. And so when you go a little further east of 183, I don't know if y'all know where 183 is, but if you go a little further east, you start getting into more rural areas where the disparity is a lot more visible. And you can see the difference. And I think it's just really that out of sight, out of mind mentality.
Cool. And then Diana and Joseph, I said to kick this off, I lived in Harris County for a few years. I was, involved in FEL and CARE and a lot of these other organizations, when there was the detention facility being built in downtown by where the Astros and the Dynamo play. I was there with a bunch of folks. I had Councilwoman Letitia Plummer on. She was there even before she was thinking about running for city council, and I applaud her and all the work that she did. But I've obviously been gone for a while now. What are the pressing issues hitting Harris County and I guess Houston as a whole? Especially with COVID and everything we've seen since George Floyd's murder. What has the temperature been on the ground, and what have you guys been doing? And we could kick it off with Diana. Yeah.
Sure. So I would say that if you could boil it down to just a handful of issues, one is kind of the disconnect between city and county government as far as rent relief, and also how we're going to facilitate funds being dispersed to people in a way that makes sense. Also, there's also a lot of miscommunication between the state and the district and the counties. We have the third largest school district. That's where I work, and also HISD, which is the largest district in the state. And yet, there are students and staff being put in unsafe situations. And beyond that is, we can say that we have the shining star of Lena Hidalgo, who has worked tirelessly to make sure that science and data are used to formulate decision making, and that is critical. And so she has really been an example, but there's still naysayers and people who want to push back, even within other levels of government, which makes her fight even harder, and we have to support her in that. So you have some of those tug of war dynamics, even just in our community, in our county, but it looks like it's really just a smaller representation of what's happening at our country at large. So we have this backlash back and forth about masks and how to open businesses and who's going to enforce what, and it's really just more chaos when we need clear leadership. And I think that's a struggle that a lot of people can relate to.
Cool. And then Joseph?
Yeah, so I actually live in Brazoria County, which is just 20 miles south of the Houston area, downtown Houston area. And our issues are similar to what we are seeing in Harris County. I do a lot of advocacy in Harris County as well. But they're also different. So Brazoria County is a mostly rural county. The big city in Brazoria is Pearland. I am on the outskirts of Pearland and a small city called Manville. And our biggest issues are we have no trust in the local government because they are not science-based. We don't have Lena Hidalgo. We don't have leadership in the county or in the city that is willing to listen to science and facts. Even though most of our residents are employed in the Houston area, in the Pearland area, right? So in the medical center, what we end up with is leadership that is behind the times. We have had major racial justice issues in both Pearland and Pearland ISD. We have leadership that does not represent the community because the style of government we have is every position is at large, whether it's school board or city council. And because of that, we have forces to consolidate their power to make sure that elections are held off years in May where there's low turnout. We have people who have been disenfranchised. Pearland ISD only administers part of the schools for Pearland City. And then Alvin ISD takes care of the rest. And that was done on purpose because they were afraid of consolidating too much liberal power from these new neighborhoods that are springing up that people from the Med Center were moving into. And so we have things like snipers on the roofs of Dawson High School during the funeral for George Floyd. George Floyd was born and raised in Pearland and went to high school in Houston and then moved for work. And when he was laid to rest in Pearland, the response from the leadership in our county was there are people of color gathering en masse. They assumed there's going to be violence, even though this was a respectful funeral. So they called in CBP to sit on the rooftop with their snipers just in case we got out of hand. They want our tax revenue. They don't want our voices, and they won't let us have representation. And so every time we fight and try to change things, we get sea lioned and ignored and overridden and gaslit, and it's ridiculous. If you look up Pearland racism on any search engine, you will see dozens upon dozens of articles from the last few years regarding Pearland ISD and Pearland proper. And so what we have is we have a county that does not attract new firms because they won't pass racial justice ordinances, equal opportunity ordinances. So technology and tech companies that are coming into the metropolitan area are bypassing Pearland. They're looking at Fort Bend and others because of our leadership being stuck in the past. The biggest employer in Pearland outside, like in the city proper, is Pearland ISD, the school district. Everybody else has to get their job from Houston or south in South County. So it's just we have health issues. We don't have a decent public health system in Brazoria County. We have a lack of leadership. We have racism, and we have public education issues. So, I mean, I could go on this for a long time, but I'll stop there.
No, all very valid points. And I wanted to actually take it back to you, Susanna. Living in Travis County, living in, I guess, the greater Austin area, people outside of this area are like, oh, you live in the most liberal area. Everything must be like rainbows and butterflies. The blueberry and the tomato soup, or whatever the saying is. But living in Travis County isn't the same for certain groups of people, right? Where you might fall on the socioeconomic rung, people of color. I think Austin's one of the, whether it's Texas or in the United States, it's one of the only major cities in the country or the state where it's losing its Black population, right? We're constantly bleeding our Black population because of X, Y, and Z. So I guess my question, and I think Diana and Joseph touched upon it in their area. How has Travis County, how has Austin Del Valle responded to things like the COVID pandemic and everything that's happened with George Floyd's murder, and I guess just in general on how we're supposed to be this here in Travis County, we're supposed to be the shining star or the city on the hill or whatever. But how do we treat those less fortunate in our Black and brown communities here?
Yeah, Travis County has a little secret. They are they're not as progressive as a lot of people think they are. One of the things that you'll find is that not only are we pushing our Black and Latino communities further east into the rural counties, even into Bastrop County, but we're also increasing the disparity gap with healthcare, food access, and basic human resources that everyone needs. And a lot of people don't like to talk about it. Like, oh no, this is Austin, this is Travis County, we're so progressive. Are we really though? Because when you look at the evidence and when you look at what they say and what they're actually doing, it's a complete contrast. They're not doing what they say. And that's a problem. We have all these wonderful resolutions that the city of Austin passed, but where's the outcome? Where's the data? Where is it all going? We don't see that. We have reports every year that show our populations are moving further east. Even displacement. We're having people from Zilker Park, from West Austin moving east because they can't afford to live there any longer either, right? So then they move east, and then that migration just happens with everyone else, right? So it's a problem. And unless we really vocalize it and we bring that to attention, nothing's going to get done, which is why, I'm glad that our organizations are working with other organizations to bring out these disparities. The COVID crisis was one of the prime examples of how it exacerbated the disparity between the Latino population and the rest of the city. If you look at where the higher number of cases are, it's in the 4-4, the 4-1, where we have huge populations of Black and Latinos. And that just, people were like, oh, wow, that's a problem. Yeah, it's been a problem. And COVID just made it come to your eyes. And that's a problem for me and for a lot of community activists out here.
Yeah, I often see your Facebook posts and just tweets and posts of other folks that the area that you're in, I think, has the highest amount of COVID cases in the county, correct?
Yeah, it does. 78744, 78741, all of the Eastern Crescent neighborhoods. And people are just surprised by this, but when you look at myself and other folks that have been advocating in this area for decades, like we've been telling you for decades that this is happening. We've been out in the front line. We've been, making phone calls. We've been protesting, and still you have no progress. Even Central Health is a healthcare district. Their job is to provide healthcare for the less fortunate. And yet, where's that money going? That money's going to renovate downtown. It's not going to healthcare. They're assuming that one day they will provide revenue to help support the healthcare services, but right now that should be going straight into healthcare and help with COVID cases, help with preventative measurements, flu season's coming up, where y'all at? I'm very disappointed in Travis County and the rest of our taxing entities.
Yeah. I want to touch on something that you mentioned and open it up the floor for Joseph, Diana, and yourself. You mentioned like stuff like protesting and, whether it be petitions or, whatever it may be. But what other methods have you, all three of you, I guess, seen your community do to become activated and, to get behind an issue? And what obstacles have you hit? Obviously there's probably a lot of success stories, which I'd love to hear, and I'm sure those tuning in would love to hear. But what have been some things that you've wanted to push for, and you did X, Y, and Z, but unfortunately it's still kind of hit a roadblock? And Diana, we'll kick it off with you on this one.
So I would say most recently, we've really tried to make progress, and Joseph has been involved with this as well, in changing the contract that the police union has in HPD, and trying to make sure that funds are used for community services rather than just putting more armed law enforcement officers on the streets. It's about defunding the police and making sure that monies and resources go towards ways to really help the community. And we've been stonewalled, I guess, at every turn. And so they have, the mayor has a task force, but really when it's kind of a joke, because whenever you hear, oh, there's a task force, that's just a way to pacify the public. But the people that have been working the issue know nothing's going to come of it. Any recommendations will be ignored. And so when we're looking at real issues and real opportunities to address equity, to address oppression, to address violent police tactics like what were employed after the protests for George Floyd, there really hasn't been any result. It's kind of just stagnant. Joseph, I didn't know if you had anything else on that. Oh, you're muted or something.
There we go. Can you hear me? Okay. So I will say this. One of the most important things of activism and organizing is education of the public. Protests are great. Rallies are great for highlighting issues, but the real hard work comes beyond that. The things that you will see people like Ashton Woods and Candace and Diana do behind the scenes is going to Austin, going to DC, and advocating for change, real change in legislation. And that's hard work to do. There's nothing glorious about it. It's not, in the public spotlight, but it's the most essential thing we have to do. And so one of the things that I try to get involved in is public education on top of that other work, letting the public know that this is what's happening. It doesn't matter if your mayor is a Democrat or Republican. If they're not doing the job that you elect them to do, you need to apply pressure. So, in Texas, municipal races are nonpartisan mostly, right? And that doesn't matter. At the end of the day, you are electing people. We elected Turner in Houston to push an agenda for change, and he's ignoring that, and he's ignored that. He's got really good spin doctors, singing his praises throughout the community, but there's actually no action going on. And so you've got to hold him accountable. You've got to hold Chief Acevedo accountable, right? I have nothing personally against either of them on a human, personal basis, but when they're not doing the job they're supposed to be doing, that's a problem. Now, I will say that there is a lot of power in the Houston Police Union. Joe Gamaldi likes to threaten activists and threaten community members when they speak out. And I want to say this clearly. I'm not anti-police. I am anti-corruption. And when I call for reform against corruption and against a system that is set up to hurt others, I'm not attacking law enforcement. I am attacking the bad eggs that they talk about, the few bad eggs. Well, if you only have a few bad eggs and all the good eggs are protecting them, that's a problem. And so I want to be clear that I do know many in law enforcement that are good people who are just as disgusted, and they push for change as well. And they get overridden and trampled on by the good eggs protecting the bad eggs. And that is shocking to me.
Cool. Thanks,
Yeah.
Joseph. Susanna?
Yeah, so self-advocacy in the community is so hard, especially when you try to advocate for a community that works full-time, have children. Their basic needs are going to work and surviving, providing for their families. They don't have time to be going down to City Hall or protesting or doing any of that. So, part of what the coalition does is we educate. We provide as much resources as we can. We make it as simple as we can, copy, paste, here's a phone number to call. Because I think that's how we get more people involved and have links to everything. My husband is wonderful because he's like, well, what do you mean? Where'd you get the data from? So then I'm like, oh man, I got to go find the data and put the links on there. So, because people will they'll think it's your opinion until they research and they say, oh, she's actually talking about this and it's coming from this data. So, like Joseph said, it's educating the community, and that's what the Del Valle Community Coalition is about. It's advocacy and just educating people on not what's right and wrong, but what's happening and what they can do to help improve their community and their quality of life.
Yeah, thank you. There's just a lot of things that I've, with this whole defund the police, I think that's something that a few of y'all mentioned. And, people get all up in arms about what does that mean? And, I remember I posted it on my Facebook, and I had a few high school classmates of mine, have some choice words for my opinion. But that doesn't mean you're eliminating the police department, right? Like here in Austin, there was a study done by ECHO that if you take 8% of the APD's police budget and put it towards, homelessness prevention, you could eradicate homelessness in Travis County, right? A lot of the stuff that's, City Council has talked about was taking money away from APD's police budget and, putting it towards, community services, whether it be education or infrastructure, or transportation, whatever. Why do you think, despite all these like good things that, 8% is so little, right? In the grand scheme of things, why do you think that despite such a small portion of it, being taken out in that case for homelessness, but in other cases, different percentages for different things, why do you think there's so much backlash, and even elected officials who claim to be, progressive or Democrats or whatever, left-leaning, still not fully aligned with this? And Susanna, I'd love for you to take charge of that.
I think the word defund is a negative phrase. And I think if we rephrase it to more palatable word as reallocating funds, people will see it in a different light. One of the things that people don't understand is you wouldn't need such a high budget and so many police officers if we put more focus onto mental health and other areas where a lot of these calls that are coming in don't have anything to do with safety. They have to do with other issues. And if we put that funding toward those other areas, homelessness and, mental health issues, we wouldn't need that huge budget. And if we reallocate as opposed to defund and make people feel a little bit more comfortable about the conversation and even talking about it, I think we would be able to go further with providing more coverage and more safety and more policies that address the real issues and not what's going on with police. Well, police brutality is a real issue. And I think that people need to understand there's a difference between police brutality and, defunding the police on why we're trying to do that. So those are like two different topics that we could talk about all day.
Cool. Thank you. Diana?
I would agree with a lot that Susanna said. And I just also want to highlight the fact that I even if we use the word reallocate or defund, and people wouldn't take the time to listen to what that actually means and the positive impact that it could have on the community, they've closed themselves off because they've kind of like settled into their comfort. And if it doesn't benefit them, they see it as a threat because they want to keep their power and keep their way of life. And any disruption to that is part of, some big scheme when it's really not. It's really just being common sense about having social workers come when there's a report of a rape or sexual assault. That makes much more sense than having a police officer who will not be as sensitive to someone who has been attacked. And just simple things like that, where we're not thinking of the people. It's more of like the system of power that has been, settled and wants to remain entrenched. And so any of those threats, they want to stop them and they want to squelch them, and they don't even want to have a reasonable conversation because it's some eroding their power instead of looking at it like helping the community in general. It's not changing anything that doesn't need. I mean, it absolutely needs to be changed because something's wrong, but it's serving the way it's supposed to for the continuation of white supremacy.
I think the new version they're using is how do you reimagine policing or the police thing, which, it's all about wording and how you get things out. And sorry, Joseph, I interrupted. I just wanted to throw that out there.
And I think it's fine. My opinion is going to be a little bit different than y'all's, right? Well, probably not as different from Diana, but I don't care how we phrase it. We need reform, right? If it's defund the police, that's fine with me because what we have right now is a distinct lack of education amongst regular Americans on what the police force is used for and why they're being used in that way. And, you use language that is kind of controversial to highlight an issue. And it's the same thing that Republicans have done for years when they talk about pro-life versus pro-choice, right? They're pro-birth, they're not pro-life. They don't care about children after they're born. They don't care to educate them or feed them or anything. You can see that from the cutbacks in social services. And part of the reason why the police are used and the way they are used is we have criminalized the poor to such an extent that city revenue depends upon fining poor people for the business of being homeless and trying to have a place to sleep and a place to eat. Or finding people who are in a rush to get to work, who are living paycheck to paycheck and they can't, get their registration updated or their license plates transferred over or whatever the issue might be. We're seeing enforcement of, all sorts of things in neighborhoods in the inner city, in poor areas, and we're putting people in debt. We're putting people in jail for being poor. That's a huge issue, right? And why is that? Because Texas has a hate relationship with the word tax. We need taxes to fund social services. We need taxes to fund schools. We need taxes to fund hospitals, the fire department, the police department. We're not using it to fund people buying mansions, right? Oh, actually, no, we are, right? Because we give tax breaks to millionaires and we criminalize the poor. And so when we re-educate how the police are being used, and even the history of the police force, right? Police in the South of the United States were set up to catch runaway slaves, right? There is a need, defund the police. We have to reimagine what law enforcement looks like and what our social services look like. And so that goes back to that whole education piece.
Cool. Thank you. I wanted to touch on, something, taking a lot of steps back. What made all of you guys get involved in, community activism? Everyone has a day job. I know Diana's an educator. Joseph, you said you worked at Microsoft, which I did not know. And Susanna, I know you're a trustee with the ISD in Del Valle. But what made you, on top of having I'm sorry?
So I actually have a trustee is a volunteer job, but I work for Advanced Micro Devices as a project manager.
There you go. So you have like several hats on. So all of you have very busy schedules, and with your day jobs and family and friends and all that. But what pushed you or what made you want to get involved in your community and I guess giving a voice to folks who don't have a voice otherwise? Diana, we can kick it off with you.
Sure. So I think, like many people, I was just absolutely devastated with the results of the 2016 election. I had been a lifelong voter. Had been, a volunteer with the Girl Scouts. And so, just living my life thinking that my service as a public educator was enough, and my voting in every single bond election or every single election was enough. But yet it wasn't, because the outcome was not what we had wanted. I didn't do any of the work behind the scenes. And so I really aimed to change that and got connected with Pantsuit Republic Houston first. Started thinking, okay, well, what do I need to focus? And the rhetoric about anchor babies and all of that just incensed me from the election. And I would technically be an anchor baby. My mom crossed the border when she was expecting me, and so that triggered me to think, okay, if I can focus on any area, I'm going to focus on immigration. I am the daughter of immigrants, and I know that this country has given me an opportunity, and I want to make sure that we don't close the door behind anyone behind us, that we are giving space. And then, hearing of all the horrible things that happen to people in detention centers, to families being separated. And so that kind of led me into growing my leadership skills, things that I had kind of already had as an educator, like different capacities, into the activist space. And I have an affinity for growing personal networks. I mean, you think about it, it's not that hard to have a community. You build a community with each different class that you have. And so I guess I didn't realize I had been doing that for already like 15 plus years. And so meeting all these wonderful people who had been doing the work for a long time, learning from them and building my capacity just led me to different opportunities. And I'm ever so grateful for all of that I learned from those group of people, and continue to learn, but pushing for policy and pushing for candidates. And so taking all of those opportunities to make change wherever we can. And even if, it's someone that I care about who's running for office, if they're not doing the right thing, we got to hold them accountable. So I know Joseph has done that for me, and, I did that when he ran. And so it's just about making sure that we're holding people to a standard. And that goes from school board all the way up to the president. And every office has consequences. And so I see that in a way that I didn't see that before, and want to push at every level. And so my life will never be the same. My eyes are like wide open, and, my family understands that this is like our life now. And that's all for now. I mean, I could keep going, but that's basically it in a nutshell. It rocked my world, and I'm so happy that it did, because we together, not just me, have been able to do some amazing things, and we're going to continue that.
Cool. Thank you. Joseph?
Diana's a hard act to follow, what can I say? But she needs to keep on spreading that fire. Like Diana, I became really active in activism and organizing after 2016. Donna Murphy on Pantsuit Nation had posted something about starting a local chapter in the Texas area. So I messaged her. I didn't know her at the time, even though she lives literally less than a mile away from my house. So it was just a chance. interaction online. And what we decided is what we were going to do was going to have teeth. We were going to do the work to organize and build community in our neighborhoods. And so it was this big grand plan, and we started it, and there have been many challenges with it. But at the end of the day, it really opened my eyes to, I didn't understand how the system worked and how it was flawed until I started organizing. And so I'm learning on the go. I'm learning from people like Diana and from like Ashton Woods and Candace Weber and Justifeo and just everybody in the community who's just so passionate and active in the Houston area. And then I started to realize I needed to be active in my hometown of Pearland. And so Robert Williams and Dylan Forbes, Chris McGarvey, Monica Morgan, it's like so many people in Brazoria County were doing so much hard work and not getting the support they needed. And so I became even more active locally. I ran for school board, and my goal was not to win the school board race. I mean, it would have been fine if I had. My goal was to build community and organize and build a volunteer base that we're using right now to try to push out the vote for the elections in November. And that community building is the most essential thing. It inspires me. My passions are racial justice and public education because I'm the son of immigrants. Comparatively speaking, I had it easy. You know, we were not well off, but my dad was very fortunate in making a decent enough salary where I didn't have to want for too much. But what I did notice was I never had the same amount as other people in my area. And I was always targeted with these comments that I didn't understand at the time were microaggressions against me. But as I've gotten more involved, you start to realize, you know, my best friend in elementary school said, "Oh, you can't come over and play. My father says my uncle died because of people like you in Vietnam." I'm like, I'm not even Vietnamese. I don't understand, right? Like, it's just this blatant ignorance that we need to stamp out, right? And what we have here is a group of people in power who are put there by people who are ignorant to other ways of life, and they fear what they don't understand. And it is my goal to make sure they understand that people are people. They want similar things. We want opportunity and happiness and health. And nobody's trying to take away anything from anybody else. What we're trying to do is build a bigger table, bring everybody to that table, have discussions, and push for change for the better. And ignorance and fear is a cancer to democracy. And we must fight that with everything we have.
Cool.
Wow.
Thank you, Joseph.
I don't even.
Susanna.
Wow, that's a lot. Thank you guys for everything that y'all do. I love the passion that you all have. I got started 11 years ago. So about 11 years ago, I moved into the district and, became a school board trustee 3 years after, this was my 8th year. And I noticed that a lot of the issues and barriers that our kids have, it's not just about education. So with the school board, we provide the best quality education we can with what we have. But there's also these outside barriers that impact our students that as a school board trustee, I don't have any control over, right? But as an activist, I can pick up that phone and I can say, County Commissioner, what's going on? Can you guys help us out? City Council, where y'all at? And so that's why I really started getting more active into it, because I knew that I can only do so much as a school board trustee within my boundaries as a trustee. But all these other issues that we're facing as children, they don't have the ability just to get up and move, right? You have to advocate for them. They don't have somebody that's going to just voluntarily do that. So that's my biggest passion, are the children. I grew up very poor, like you just wouldn't believe it. So I know what it's like. I know what it's like to not really care about anything else except for going to school and making sure that we're fed and we get to come home to loving parents, right? That's what we had, right? So I don't want the kids that are in my district to have to face as many barriers as I did as a child, right? And so that's why I do what I do, is try to make it a little bit easier. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, and I understand that, but we got to keep pushing.
Well, I am in awe of all three of you, and you guys are all such an inspiration to myself, and I'm sure many others in your respective communities. And most likely, throughout. Out of all the work that you guys do, I'm sure there have been naysayers and people who have maybe disapproved of the work or disapproved of things that you've said. How do you deal with criticism when it comes to, like, in your mind, you're doing the right thing, you're trying to help these communities, and then you might have, maybe it's a friend or a family member, or maybe it's just a stranger on social media who criticizes you for X, Y, and Z. Like, how do you deal with that disapproval or that pushback, I guess? Diana?
So number one, the role of a community organizer, you definitely have to respect the space. So I can't come in with my privilege as someone who is a citizen and, into a space like United We Dream. I worked with them for a great many years, to kind of push my ideas or whatever. I have to sit back and know my role. I can push and be vocal to the public, but always following the lead of those who are undocumented, those who are affected by those heinous policies. And so that is step one. So it just depends on who is giving the negative feedback. Is it justified? Because sometimes you have to be open to hearing things that you don't like so you can grow as a leader. Number two, if it's somebody who is a friend or a family member, and they are not understanding, I definitely make sure that my spaces, like on public social media, they are not going to be any platform for hate-filled language. And if someone doesn't understand where I'm coming from or what I'm doing, then that can be a conversation offline, but I'm not going to promote that, on my page. And sometimes it's something that they're not going to understand, and that's okay, because I know that I'm doing the right thing and I'm doing the work that needs to be done. And so, sometimes if you get somebody who is critical of your work, well, good, that means I'm doing something right. So, it really depends. You have to have a thick skin. There's nothing that prepared me more for all of those, criticisms than being a middle school teacher. So I spent years with very sassy teenagers, going through puberty. And let me tell you, that is a trial by fire. So I can handle a lot. And you also have to have your, poker face. You can't let that rattle you, because you have a job to do. You have things that you're fighting for. And all of that stuff is a distraction to try to keep you from meeting that goal. So that's basically it.
Cool. Yeah, I will say middle school kids are brutal, as a former middle schooler, and how kids were to me. Joseph, you're next.
I tell you what, she hit the nail on the head, what she said, basically. But to elaborate on my side of it, it's learning to be very humble and to act with empathy. And trust me, I fail a lot, right? I get righteously mad about things, and I forget empathy sometimes. And I have amazing people like Diana and Daniel Cohen and others that is like, will message me. It's like, hey, you don't seem like you right now. What's going on? But listening is so important. Being mindful of the space is something that I've had to learn, and it's so critical to all that. And there will be criticisms that, you can do everything that you feel is right and that others feel is right, and you will get legitimate criticism out there. As long as it's not dehumanizing another group of people, you got to listen, and then you've got to act with open, honest, and kind actions, right? So I believe in transparency, radical transparency. When I ran for school board, every penny I took in, I put in reports and put it on my website. There was never going to be any question where my funding was coming from or what my beliefs were. I'm not going to say one thing and do another. I will live up to the expectations I set forth. And one of the first things I did when I ran for office was get a group of people to promise to set up a parent advocates group to hold me accountable if I won. I feel like you have to be answerable to the community. You're not going to make everybody happy. There are going to be people who have a different moral compass than you, and that's fine. But as long as you're empathetic and kind about how you act, that's all you can do as a person. And just push for greater inclusion and greater love.
Cool. Susanna?
Yeah, I would say have a strong support system, supporters. I have very strong family ties. Have somebody that can watch your kids, have somebody that can edit your work that you're putting out there. At the end of the day, can you sleep at night without, any issues? Like, that's what I tell everyone that I work with. Who cares what this person said? How do you feel about it at the end of the night? Does your heart feel full, or do you feel negative about what just happened? And if you can sleep with no problems because you're a good person and what you think is being done is, to the best of your ability and is right for the community, then don't worry about what other people say, because somebody's always going to have something to say. Somebody's always going to think that what you're doing is not beneficial to the community. I'm fortunate to have a very supportive husband who does a lot for me. He's watching the kids right now, but have a strong support system, because if you don't have somebody that can even check you sometimes and say, hey, Susanna, you crossed that line, you need to go and make it right. And so you need somebody that's going to be honest with you and they can tell you stuff like that. And then at the same time, have other people that you can go have a drink with and just vent, right? Because you need to do that as well. It's all about, your mental health, how you feel, and knowing what you're doing is going to be beneficial to not just yourself, but to everyone around you.
Thank you. And then I want to touch on this point, Susanna, you being, currently an elected, and then Joseph and Diana running for office. I'll frame the question to you first, Susanna. How has you being an elected official, how has that helped you in terms of giving back to your community?
It helps a lot. It opens up a lot more doors. As a regular citizen, you really can't pick up the phone and, it's a lot harder. But as an elected official, you can, it does open a lot of doors. And I use it to the best of I take advantage as often as I can. Hey, I used to not do it because I used to be afraid of like, they're thinking I'm going to, overuse my power or whatever. But when you're in a position to where your kids are suffering every day because of the lack of representation, you need to use those tools that are given to you. And it took me a while to understand that. And so now I'm just like, where y'all at? This is from, what's going on in the school district. This is what we're trying to do. How can you help me and the school and the kids? So I would say that it has opened up a lot more doors.
Cool. And then Joseph and Diana, if you guys don't mind just touching a little bit on your run for office. And then even though you guys unfortunately lost, even in that loss, how were you able to impact the community in a positive manner? And Diana, we can kick it off with you. Oh, you're muted.
I was going to let Joseph go because he ran first.
Okay, cool.
And then
totally fine. Joseph, the floor is yours.
My run for office really opened my eyes to a lot of the needs in the community that I wasn't aware of. When you go door to door and you speak to people in the community, you learn so much more about what's going on in their life. We are so limited by kind of our sphere of influence and our bubble. And to put yourself out there, you learn about other people's issues and bubbles, and you build community. And that's really the most important part of running for office is building that group of people who support you, because those people will work with you in the future, whether they are currently elected officials or community members. You can then empower them to push forward. And so there are a couple of wonderful people running for office right now in Pearland for school board, Jess Schaefer and Tony Carter, who were volunteers on my campaign and Donna Murphy's campaign. And I am so proud of the work they're doing and their passion and their fire. And I'm so proud of the fact that they're going out and making contact with other people. I mean, virtually now, unfortunately, because of COVID. And it's so important, because when you realize there's a community out there that you can help and be a part of that you didn't see before, there's just so much more good you can do. And it's a humbling experience. If you run for office for your ego, you're doing it for the wrong reason, and you're going to be gravely disappointed, because it is hard on you, but it is totally worth every second of it.
I agree. And so I just want to back up a little bit, because back in like December of 2018, I kind of, well, or maybe November, I kind of already knew that I wanted to run for office, but, trying to figure out, how to approach my family and which office I was going to narrow my focus on. But before that, I wanted to really make sure I was running for the right reasons, and I knew that I wanted to change and uplift the community. It was never about me. It was always about what's best for the community, and kept that centered. But also knowing that I needed the support system. And so I met with Donna Murphy, and we talked about having a cohort of candidates, people that were running, that would help each other with resources, check in from time to time, emotionally, and just hey, where are you getting your things printed, and all those sorts of things that you have to learn as a first-time candidate, especially when we knew that we were lacking the monetary resources. We were going to utilize and leverage our network to make sure that we could make the most of our campaign. Joseph was part of that. There were a lot of different people that were running in Houston that were part of that. Michelle Palmer, who is still running for State Board of Education, she was part of that cohort. So we helped each other on campaigns. And so from school board all the way up to what I decided to run for, which was county commissioner in Harris County. And so before I even ran, we had already been working on that cohort, building that and that momentum. And so I felt really prepared, because I had been hearing about different things. And that was I would say it's just invaluable to have that network to draw on. But not only that, I felt like I was emotionally prepared to go through this and have the stamina for a campaign that lasted over a year. I was lucky enough to win the primary, but that wasn't an accident. I mean, we leveraged a lot of community support. I did, all sorts of community outreach that, like town halls, and Monica Roberts was at my first town hall. And there were 7 people there, and we just circled up. We had a big space, but we just circled up. The weather was terrible, but we did a Facebook Live, and I went through all of my, information, because people didn't know. And that speaks to Joseph's point earlier. People didn't know what a county commissioner does. So I'm a teacher, right? So let me teach you. And so I went through this service is provided by the county, and this is how it works, and this is how much was spent, and this is what I'd like to see in precinct 3, and naming and rattling all the things. And so even though I wasn't the winner at the end, I made sure that I connected with the people. I listened to what they needed. I'm still communicating with the community about needs. I do an update Monday, Wednesday, and Friday nights to share information. I'm still out there. I'm doing forums. I am still out there to do what's right for the community. And I pushed my opponent to the left, because he listened to all the things that I brought up, and he's incorporating that in his campaign. And at the end of the day, I can count that as a win. Plus, he had to spend a lot of money to beat me. And, I'm just saying, it was pretty awesome to have all of that experience and learn what I was capable of. And I'm going to take that further and go to the next step, whatever that is.
Cool. Thank you both for running and all the work you all are doing. I know we have about a minute left, so I just wanted to end it with just going around and asking folks their advice to younger people, or just people who might not be involved in their community, their advice on how to get involved. And Susanna, we'll kick it off with you.
Yeah, I have a few things. One is to make sure you have a strong support system. Like I said, you need to have people that can check you, people that can, edit your stuff. Ask for help. I know there's a lot of proud people out in the community that aren't used to asking for help, but ask for help. Like that's a big thing. Say no. It's okay to say no. We can't do everything. Like you're one person. Look for other groups that are already doing stuff in the community. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Give space, get space type of environments. You know, go in there, but don't go in there trying to change things up. Just listen and be involved. A lot of organizations are looking for volunteers. And the last thing is unplug. Sometimes you just need to unplug, walk away, take a weekend off, and then get back in there.
Cool. Yeah, I always, with work and with, folks I work with and people I might manage, I always stress the importance of self-care, especially during these crazy times of a pandemic and civil unrest and an election and everything else going on. Like, take care of yourself. Diana?
Definitely know your capacity. So if you need to rest and step back, it's okay to do that. Then you can come back refreshed and ready to go. And also, you have to know what you're fighting for. And if you feel good about that, like Susanna said, if you can go to sleep without a problem, look at yourself in the mirror, then you've done the right thing. And so if you're fighting what you're passionate for, find a place to volunteer that you can kind of learn from others, because that's how you make connections. That's how you build your skill set.
Cool. Thank you, Diana. And Joseph, finishing it off with you.
Yeah. So a couple of things. One, definitely support system. So I would be remiss if I forgot to mention that my family's amazing and they support me in every single way. And thank you, Susanna, for reminding me to mention that, because I couldn't do this without my family. I couldn't do this without my tribe, my fellow activist community, right? So there's a lot of listening. And if there's something you're passionate about, see who's already doing the work and help them. If nobody's doing the work, then you become that voice and do the work. And that's hard to do. That's stretching yourself. But it's so important to find your passion, to find your support system, and to learn what your capacity is. And as activists, we all push ourselves super hard. And we need to learn to take a step back and depend on our community. So I mirror everything they said.
Cool. Well, I want to thank all three of you for being on tonight. I want to thank all three of you for the amazing work that you guys have done, do, and will do in the future. Just stay safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll all chat again soon. Maybe even meet up in the future in real life when we're allowed to. So, have a great night and a great weekend.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.